and our investigators are working through those. I think we had about 50 calls last night, so the public is really, paying attention. So we thank people for doing that.
What were those calls about? Just people reporting sick or dead birds?
That's right. Birds do die in ones and twos, and so what we're really looking for is people to focus on those larger mortality events. If there are, groups of birds, we want to hear about those. But people are, calling in things, things that have in some cases been already investigated. Just one bird, we will be able to triage those.
Is it just in Wellington, or are they sort of proactively surveilling?
So we talked about last night that there is ongoing surveillance at wildlife hospitals, and so wildlife who are presented because they're unwell, because they have accidents even, those are being tested by our colleagues at wildlife hospitals across New Zealand. Of course, we are relying on the public to make reports of 3 or more dead or sick birds across all of New Zealand, of course.
Can you talk us through what the MPI team are doing behind you?
The MPI team are just here to satisfy ourselves that nothing has been missed here. We're just having a look here today, and we had a look yesterday as well, just to satisfy ourselves.
And what can you tell us about the skua, like today? I understand it was euthanised yesterday.
Yes, so the bird has been euthanised, and this is on the policy of the Wellington Zoo, so not a decision by the ministry, but a policy decision by Wellington Zoo, and that's to protect the other animals at the zoo.
I understand the skua was found on the 10th of July. Was it taken to the zoo that same day?
So the 10th of July was Friday. It was public holiday. A member of the public found that animal here on that Friday, reported it to a rehabilitation facility. That rehabilitator called the Exotic Pest and Disease Hotline and DOC. DOC was able to advise them to bring that animal to the Wellington Zoo. It was brought to Wellington Zoo on that Friday weekend. Then it was quarantined, so we're really grateful to our colleagues at the zoo for taking these extremely good actions. It was sampled, quarantined, samples moved to our laboratory on the Monday, and then tested, and then the sequencing released yesterday.
And when it's taken to the zoo, whose responsibility is it under? Is it the zoo who decides around testing, or is it MPI?
The zoo sampled the bird as soon as it arrived, and then quarantined it.
So do we not test those samples on weekends?
The samples were held at the zoo and the bird was quarantined.
Going forward, if say a bird is found on a Friday night, will the samples be tested over the weekend?
I think we can accept that birds are going to continue to come here from the subantarctics that may have the disease, right? And so I think what we need to focus on is what we do next now that we have detected one of these in New Zealand. And that is about reporting more than one bird that's dead, so looking for spread in New Zealand wildlife, and also keeping an eye on those poultry, both commercial and backyard, and calling those in. The investigators work 24/7, so they take calls throughout the weekends, public holidays, and they will triage those. If the animal's not quarantined, then of course that can be expedited. If there's a large number of dead birds, those can be expedited.
Do you know whereabouts on Petone Beach the bird was found?
No.
So just to make sure I have it correct, so is there going to be an increased sense of urgency around testing now that one has been found, or are we just sort of continuing with the protocol as it was?
I think we can have an increased sense of urgency when it's warranted. So if there's a mass die-off of birds, then those will be more urgently triaged, and we will ask our laboratory staff to work over the weekend. A single bird in quarantine is not a risk.
Is there modelling that shows what kind of case increase we might see from this single case, and what the timeline of that might look like?
So there is some interesting science that's been done on subantarctic islands that talks about first incursions in pelagic seabirds like skua, and the time based on genetic analysis between those first detections and potentially impacts in those populations on those islands. Of course, each of these ecosystems will be different because we have different birds here in New Zealand than what they'd have on those subantarctic islands. So not exactly, but there are some things we can learn from the scientific literature about the delay between the first detection in a pelagic seabird and then, noticeable mortality events in the kind of coastal populations of birds that live there. In that paper, they're suggesting kind of 2 to 4 months, but I really don't want us to be making those types of guesses because these situations are so different.
Do you think the single case means there will be more cases, or have there been instances where a single case like this means that it can be isolated?
I don't know that information. We don't get to know each bird who's arrived in each of these islands if it was positive or negative. And so I really hate to guess that. I expect that these birds will continue to arrive here. Obviously, in the Southern Ocean, these animals are infected. We are learning something about the infection in the Southern Ocean by testing these birds. And of course, we only test the ones that our surveillance system interacts with in the same way that Australia is. Right, so we're sampling some of these birds out of those populations. We're learning something about those, and I expect that to continue.
Speaking of Australia, what lessons do you think we should learn from how they've been dealing with this? Are there changes we could make to this early introduction which would mean that we could deal with the situation better?
We're absolutely in contact with our colleagues in Australia very, very frequently. I know my colleagues in the Conservation and Health Ministries are also in contact with their colleagues. So certainly we're continuing to exchange information, share how we've experienced these findings, and share the science that our teams are doing and our scientists in our communities. Yes, the disease spreads very rapidly between chickens, and so there would have to be a very high level of biosecurity between sheds for that to be able to be stopped. We've been working closely with our colleagues in the poultry industry and working through these kinds of issues. I think what the poultry industry and farmers in New Zealand understand is that, defence is the best offence here. They need to increase their biosecurity, work on the resilience of their operations, really become focused on keeping the disease out of these flocks.
We've had an infectious disease that epidemiologists tell us that bird flu can impact domestic cats and dogs.
That's correct.
Given this is a popular dog walking beach and this is where that bird was found, do you have any advice for dog walkers?
Absolutely. Dog walkers and pet owners, myself included, we all need to make sure that our pets aren't eating dead wildlife and aren't interacting with wildlife. These are things that we should all be doing anyway, even in the absence of bird flu.
Are there any other mammals that you're concerned about?
Absolutely. Seals and sea lions have been significantly affected in other areas. We talked last night about how any mammal that eats sick or dead wildlife that are infected can become infected.
Is there anything else you'd like to add or anything we've missed?
No, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Do we expect that these briefings will become regular, or no?
Question for my comms colleagues. I have bosses just like you guys.
We follow the same formula that we did with hornets and fruit fly, that we'll put up a daily little update on our website, provided nothing has happened. And it's also to help us, instead of getting 100 media queries, is there an update? And there's not, so we do that. But as soon